Hi, I'm Dr. Rachel Rudolph. I'm the Extension Vegetable Specialist for the University of Kentucky, and today we're going to talk about foliar sampling and foliar tissue analysis. So foliar tissue analysis is used to detect plant response to fertilizer regime. It's used to determine toxic or deficient levels of nutrients, and it's used to estimate fertilization needs prior to deficiency or toxicity symptoms. So a grower could sample periodically and try to stay ahead of the curve in the case that perhaps deficiency or toxicity symptoms would develop. So they could stop it before it happens. So one thing to keep in mind is that the analysis, the tissue analysis, will only be as good as the sampling protocols that are used. So it's really important to be consistent with sampling and know what the lab wants and expects before you even collect the sample. And that will ensure that the results that are returned from the lab are useful, are accurate, and that money isn't wasted and time isn't wasted, and that crop productivity can be as optimal as desired. So there are several factors that come into play when properly sampling. Sample unit, and that means basically the area that's going to be sampled. So are we talking about a high tunnel, 2 high tunnels, an acre, 2 acres, 3 acres? Are there multiple fields of the same crop? If so, you'd want to sample those separately. So if it's 5 continuous acres of tomato and that soil is fairly uniform, it'd probably be okay to sample that all together and have one sample. But if you have an acre here, an acre there, 2 different spots on the farm, you'd probably want that to be sampled separately. So you'd submit two separate samples. In the case of a high tunnel, if a grower has 2 high tunnels, they'd want to sample those separately. Just in case there are minor differences that perhaps the grower isn't picking up on. What leaves to sample, how many leaves to sample, and how to handle that sample once you've collected it. Those are 3 other things we're going to talk about. A couple other things though to keep in mind is that if you have 2 or 3 or 4 separate cultivars of the same crop, for example, we're in a high tunnel with tomato, if there were multiple cultivars in this high tunnel, I would sample each cultivar separately. I would not combine those samples because there is a chance that those different cultivars respond differently to the same fertility regime. So even though the grower is irrigating and fertilizing everything the same, there is a chance that there's a difference, and you'd want to know that. Okay, so what leaves to sample and how many leaves to sample? That's something that before you sample, you should check out the lab that you've chosen to work with. You should check out their website. They should be very specific about what they expect to receive. So for example, for tomato, Waters Lab in Owensboro is very clear about what they are expecting to receive. 25 to 50 leaves, and for a mature or fairly mature plant, they want the 4th leaf down from the growing tip. So what does that look like? Okay, so we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a leaf. This is a leaflet. So when they say they want 25 to 50 leaves, they mean 25 to 50 of these, not one of these little leaflets, right? So you're going to need a pretty big bag to store all your leaves. So keep that in mind. A little paper lunch sack is not going to cut it. So make sure you have the right size bag to store all your samples, right? So a bag this size is probably appropriate for one set of samples. So 25 to 50 tomato leaves would fit pretty well in here. So you would want to go around the tunnel, much like you would do a soil sample. You'd want to randomly choose plants, and you wouldn't want to sample from any plant that's diseased, injured, wilting because of a clogged emitter. Anything that's out of the ordinary, you wouldn't want to sample from that unless you're specifically trying to diagnose that plant or that area. The other thing to keep in mind is, okay, so you've got your samples. Let's say you've got your samples and you're ready to mail them off. You're going to store them in paper bags and you're going to mail them as quickly as you can. So overnight shipping or 2-day shipping, you want them to get there in pretty good condition. You don't want them to be moldy or mushy. You want the lab to receive as good of a sample as they possibly can. So now think about, in addition to the foliar sampling, it would also be a really great idea to collect a soil sample at the same time. So again, a representative soil sample, and that gives us a really good idea of what the grower has put down, and then we can match that to what the plant is actually taking up. And sometimes those two do not correspond, and that helps us diagnose what's going on. So for example, if the soil pH is really low, but the grower has put down plenty of magnesium, but the plant isn't taking up magnesium, that helps us answer that question of why is the plant deficient in magnesium? When soil pH is below 5.5, magnesium uptake is reduced. So that answers that question. So it wouldn't help the grower to put down more magnesium, right? Another example is if we're seeing a potassium deficiency in the plant. Well, the grower knows that they have put down plenty of potassium pre-plant, for example, and perhaps they're even using potassium nitrate to fertilize the crop. Well, when we take a soil sample in addition to the foliar sample, that soil sample could very possibly reveal that there is a great deal of magnesium in the soil. And if there is more magnesium than potassium in the soil, the plant will preferentially take up magnesium. So that will lead to a potassium deficiency in the plant, even though there is not a deficiency in the soil. All very useful pieces of information to put to our puzzle, right? So plant fertility is really important in managing, in using integrated pest management. So when a plant is healthy and fertility is on point, the plant can better defend itself against diseases and pests. If a plant is in a weakened state because of a lack of a certain nutrient or perhaps toxic levels of certain nutrients, that puts it in a weakened state and makes it more susceptible to other environmental or biotic factors coming towards it. So we've got an environment here that is constantly transitioning. We've got rain, we've got wind, we've got a lot of things being thrown at crops, and we want to make sure that they're as strong and as healthy as they possibly can be. And foliar testing is one component to monitoring the health of the plant, just like we go in for our annual physicals and get our blood pressure checked. Think of foliar testing as something very similar to that for plants. So that's all I have for now, and if you've got any questions, again, my name is Rachel Rudolph, and feel free to contact me at the University of Kentucky. Thank you.